Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Future 2022 lectures offered by the Eurasia Foundation and the University of Complutense. My name is Brigitte Lejuez, and among the partners you see on the map, I represent Dublin City University in Ireland, the little green dot on the western end of Europe. In this lecture, I will present a perspective in relation to Goal 2. You are probably by now familiar with the SDGs, and I will just recap briefly what our focus is going to be. Goal 2, as you know, is end hunger, achieve food security and improved nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Our theme today will be based on Target 2.4 that aims by 2030 to ensure sustainable food production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystems, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding and other disasters, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. The focus I have chosen to discuss with you today is based on one question. If the conventional modes and models of large-scale production have failed to provide for all, what new or currently underdeveloped models could be considered. So we are going to focus today on the benefits of both permaculture, that offer the means to increase access to low-scale agricultural areas under productive and sustainable practices, and veganism, that removes the need for excessive reliance on meat consumption with all the social inequalities and health hazards that come with it, and supports instead an agricultural production that has a positive effect on the environment. So if you look at the table of contents, this is what I propose that we look at. After an introduction highlighting the current situation and the need to promote sustainable agriculture and rural development, first, we shall examine the history and principles of permaculture, its position in the world and its benefits. Second, we will discuss veganism, what it is, what is its relation to climate change and figures around the world, and also its benefits. In conclusion, we will see the connection between veganic permaculture and all the other SDGs. Finally, we shall briefly look at some literary examples of writers examining these issues. As illustrated here, agricultural sustainability is key to ending world hunger. This is the conclusion of a new report released by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO. Climate change will increase the number of people struggling with food insecurity by 2030 if agriculture does not adapt to new climate conditions. 1 in 3 people did not have enough food in 2020. That's 2.37 billion people. That's 320 million more than in 2019, according to the World Bank's analysis of World Food Programme data, and you can find out more on this subject by opening the link provided here. In a report published last year, the FAO makes the case for using agroecological methods to strengthen the resilience of food systems, especially in severely affected regions. In 2007, a severe drought in Lesotho and South Africa caused crop yields to drop dramatically. The main staple food in Lesotho, maize, doubled in price and became unaffordable for many. a fifth of the population needed emergency food assistance. This is only one example of the dramatic impact climate change can have on food systems and livelihoods. While climate change did not create food shortages by itself, a study says that it exacerbated both the drought and its knock-on impacts for food security. A more natural and traditional approach to agriculture could help mitigate the impact of climate change, according to the FAO. Agribusinesses such as Monsanto sometimes cite the so-called moral imperative to feed a hungry world in order to defend the status quo farm policy and deflect attention from the destruction that so-called modern agriculture is inflicting on the environment and human health. José Graziano da Silva, Director General of the UN's FAO, argues instead that the current conditions of modern agriculture are no longer acceptable. The major objective of SARD is to increase food production in a sustainable way and enhance food security. This will involve education initiatives, utilization of economic incentives, and the development of appropriate and new technologies, thus ensuring stable supplies of nutritionally adequate food, access to those supplies by vulnerable groups, and productions for markets. Employment and income generation to alleviate poverty, and natural resource management and environmental protection. And again, you can follow this relevant link for more details. This also involves to give priority attention to the state of malnutrition in the world, stop the current dependence on capitalistic economic ways, and grow locally and where possible and necessary communally, be prepared to change eating habits and traditions, be mindful of protecting the environment, and respect human rights. With the potentially severe effect that climate change can have for food security and how conflicts and pandemics can, as we saw recently, worsen food insecurity, agroecology and its chemical-free and traditionally led principles could, according to UN report, make the world's food systems more resilient. Let's now turn to permaculture, starting with its history. In 1929, Joseph Russell Smith, an American economic geographer and academic, published Tree Crops, a Permanent Agriculture, from the observations he had made during his global travels, whereby he saw the negative impacts of soil erosion in multiple countries. In response to widespread deforestation, plough agriculture, and subsequent erosion of soils, he focused on the idea of fruit and nut tree breeding as human and animal food crops that could stabilize watersheds and restore soil health. He encouraged the development of genetically superior cultivars that could be grown in poor, often mountainous soils, so as to improve them. Smith saw the world as an interrelated whole and suggested mixed systems of trees with understory crops. This book immediately inspired others, like the Australian agronomist and engineer P.A. Yeomans, who advanced a definition of permanent agriculture as one that can be sustained indefinitely. His 1964 book, Water for Every Farm, introduced both an observation-based approach to land use in Australia in the 1940s and 50s as a way to managing the supply and distribution of water in semi-arid regions. Toyo Iko Kakawa, who was a writer but worked as a social worker in the Japanese slums and studied ways of combating the sources of poverty, was inspired by Smith too. After reading his book, he managed to persuade many of Japan's upland farmers during the 1930s that the solution to their soil erosion problem lay in widespread tree planting that helps to conserve the soil, supply food for humans, and provide fodder for animals, the three dimensions of his system. Kagawa thus became a forerunner of modern forest farming and an inspiration to Robert Hart, an English horticulturist who pioneered forest gardening in temperate climates. Hart examined the interactions that take place between plants in natural systems, particularly in woodland. Based on the observation that the natural forest can be divided into distinct layers, he developed an existing small orchard of apples and pears into an edible landscape consisting of 7 dimensions. A canopy layer consisting of the original mature fruit trees, a low tree layer of smaller nut and fruit trees on dwarfing root stocks, a shrub layer of fruit bushes such as currants and berries, a herbaceous layer of perennial vegetables and herbs, a ground cover layer of edible plants that spread horizontally, a rhizosphere or underground dimension of plants grown for their roots and tubers, and finally a vertical layer of vines and climbers. Hart had a vision for the spread of the forest garden throughout even the most heavily built-up areas. He brings us closer to permaculture as his position was that not everybody has enough land to grow forests, but a lot of us have gardens or can possibly avail of an allotment or have access to open spaces such as industrial wastelands where trees can be planted. Indeed, he grew all his food in a small area. Please take a look at the reference page at the end of this presentation for details of publications. Interestingly, all 3 men, Smith, Kagawa, and Hart, were pacifists at a time when the world knew 2 world wars. Their respective and common visions of how the world could feed itself was based on considerations that can benefit all. Kagawa also inspired the farmer and philosopher Masanobu Fukuoka, whose writings on natural farming influenced the growth of the permaculture movement. His natural farming aimed at the revegetation of desertified lands. He was a proponent of no-till, herbicide and pesticide-free cultivation methods. The summary of his book, Sowing Seeds in the Desert, Natural Farming, Global Restoration and Ultimate Food Security, is as follows. The earth is in great peril due to the corporatization of agriculture, the rising climate crisis, and the ever-increasing levels of global poverty, starvation, and desertification on a massive scale. This present condition of global trauma is not natural, but a result of humanity's destructive actions. And according to Masanobu Fukuoka, it is reversible. We need to change not only our methods of earth stewardship, but also the very way we think about the relationship between human beings and nature. These thinkers were not only concerned by the impoverishment of soils, but also about human malnutrition. In different ways, they saw the dangers of traditional practices and the need to turn to natural cultivation to ensure permanent sources of food for all. Their views, therefore, led to radical changes in lifestyle too. Hart himself, and this is important for the second part of our talk, after having worked as a dairy farmer, adopted a vegan diet. His forest garden was a vegan organic food production system. In 1962, the American conservationist Rachel Carson published her seminal book, Silent Spring, that documented the adverse environmental effects caused by the indiscriminate use of pesticides. Her research brought environmental concerns to public attention and helped create environmental protection agencies. It is considered by prominent figures as probably the book that changed the scientific world the most after The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Then in the late 1960s, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, both Australian environmental designers, started developing ideas about stable agricultural systems. Like others before and after them, they could see the unsustainable nature of Western industrialized methods, and their appreciation of indigenous worldviews was also essential to their formulation of permaculture. In their view, the problem stemmed from a dependence on non-renewable resources and industrial methods, poisoning land and water, reducing biodiversity and removing billions of tons of topsoil from previously fertile landscapes. They alerted academic and public attention with the publication of their 1978 book, Permaculture 1. Permaculture is generally considered as having been conceived and developed by Mollison and Holmgren in Australia. This is because they moved from theory to practice, with courses educating small farmers and individuals attracted by the philosophy of permaculture to both practice it and continue the training in their turn through a formal permaculture design course and certification, PDC, which has taught hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world how to grow food and be sustainable using permaculture design principles. And here is a link to an online series of permaculture lectures given by Bill Mollison. This summary of permaculture's early history shows us that the recognition of the need to protect soils from detrimental industrialized methods and economic choices in order to give access to sustainable food sources for all, getting thus rid of poverty and hunger, have actually been in place for many years, starting with Smith almost a century ago. Permaculture has developed worldwide, but is still a minority agricultural practice, yet it answers the problems faced by the world today. Permaculture is the design and implementation of perennial sustainable agricultural systems. Systems designed in this way tend to have closed energy cycles, being modeled on natural ecosystems. The design system should also have a high degree of interlinkage, waste outputs from one part of the system being used as inputs for another part. The ideal is a closed cycle where outputs become inputs, requiring no primary inputs and producing no waste products. This will not be found in single output systems, which is why permaculture design tends to produce multi-layered and highly interlinked systems, echoing natural ecosystems. And the pictures here show a clear design of an area divided into connected zones and the way it looks in reality. Now let's move on to permaculture's principles. Permaculture's ethics are based on 1. Care of the earth, provision for all life systems to continue and multiply. 2. Care of people, provision for people to access those resources necessary for their existence. 3. Set limits to consumption, and another important aspect here, redistribute surplus. Permaculture emphasizes patterns of landscape, including housing, and careful species assemblies. The focus of permaculture is not on individual elements, but rather on the relationships between them. It seeks to minimize waste, human labor, and energy input, and maximizes benefits through synergy. Permaculture design is founded in replicating or imitating natural patterns found in ecosystems because these solutions have emerged through evolution over thousands of years and have proven to be effective. As a result, the implementation of permaculture design will vary widely depending on the region of the earth it is located in. For instance, a permaculture garden aims to catch and store energy. Depending on where you live, this may be either sun, rain, streams, grass, or all of them. Beauty is also nurtured, and many flowers are edible and useful to vegetables as they attract pollinators. Regarding renewable resources, take wood for instance, which is building material or helps provide heat. Wood also adds shade around home and around a garden in regions where extreme heat can be reached, thus reducing the need for artificial climate control and the amount of energy that will be needed to keep the home comfortable and the garden watered. For more on the 12 principles of permaculture, please consult the website that has been provided here, underlined under link. And for practical videos, I would advise you to consult Andrew Millison on YouTube. So where is permaculture around the world? Permaculture has been practiced in Africa for over 30 years, with ongoing and effective projects mainly situated in southern and eastern Africa. Central and West Africa have seen a rapid increase in interest for and development of permaculture projects more recently. Famdizanai in Zimbabwe is the longest running project and has led to the establishment of schools and colleges permaculture education called SCOPE, which became regional SCOPE, known as ReScope, in 2007 and is now based in Malawi. ReScope supports permaculture projects to make permaculture into formal education systems. The Malawian government has funded a pilot project to bring permaculture into primary schools. Permaculture in Africa is linked to the wider sustainability network through organizations like the Participatory Land Management, the PLUM Association, which has networks across southern and eastern Africa. And again, I'm offering you here different links that you can consult with videos about different activities in different countries. In North America, permaculture projects are continually developed and there is an impressive number of companies offering permaculture courses. In Canada, in the provinces of Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and Saskatchewan. In the US, pretty much everywhere from Alaska to Florida, with a large number of projects in California, Colorado, Indiana, Oregon, Texas, and Washington State, for example. Central and South America, again, permaculture is widely spreading there, especially in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, Peru, and Uruguay. To see where projects in North, Central, and South America and around the world are located, please refer to the map given in the title of this slide under World. I would also advise you to look at a comprehensive and interesting website called Permaculture International. For useful videos, check Whole Systems Design and I'm also giving you links to two interesting websites, one on the ancient gardens of North America and also one specifically on Latin America. In Asia, projects have been developed in Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Nepal, and Thailand. And I would invite you to consult the IDEP website focusing on helping people help themselves. Also, the Permaculture Institute Asia, with the history of the permaculture movement there included, and another one called Family Farming Permaculture Institute Asia for more details. In India, permaculture has been growing quickly as it suits the national tradition of small farmers. An excellent example of turning an official wasteland into an oasis is available with this underlined video link, which I would very strongly suggest you watch. It's extremely interesting. it's probably one of the most impressive examples you're going to find. In the Middle East, again, many projects in place, among which some in Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. You will find also that the Greening the Desert page has a video on a Palestinian woman who has started her own permaculture garden in Jordan. Very much worth a watch. And also the fact that permaculture can improve the lives of displaced people in camps in particular, and there is a link here with videos and explanations of an example in Iraq. In Europe, well, I suppose this is where permaculture projects have multiplied in recent years, and where it is possibly becoming mainstream, if one can say that about permaculture. Indeed, permaculture is practiced in most European countries, and there is an increasing number of networking organizations connecting people and projects in regional and national groups. And to find out more, I would invite you to look at the Permaculture Association website, which is underlined here as well. And also have a look at the Council of Europe website. The Council of Europe works to connect European practitioners, organizing a biennial convergence and sharing information on permaculture education. Okay, so you have very interesting aspects here of permaculture with the definition, courses, video excerpts are available as well. And finally, for Europe, I would also advise you to look at this link on eco-villages of Europe. Okay, now this one is in both English and French, and both languages have different documents to offer. I would also advise you to look at a specific example that is in France. It's one that is very much talked about, La Ferme du Bec et Loin. There is a video, Facebook video that is very interesting with different interviews of the couple who have started this project, Perrine and Charles Hervé Gruyère. And in this video they explain the relation between fighting climate change and the importance of local knowledge via ancestral traditions, but applied in the here and now. They insist on the quality of the soil as actually the main key to productivity. Having a good soil takes time, but is the basis of everything. Permaculture makes it possible to create humus and thus to restore the soil, while traditional agriculture destroys it, contributing in particular to its erosion. In fact, traditional agriculture simply feeds plants with chemical fertilizers, but stopped feeding the soil a long time ago. Mechanization also contributes to the destruction of soils. Recreating fertile soils is possible, but only on small areas because it requires precisely to work without mechanization. Perrine and Charles realized that when they started their farm, their soil was actually quite bad to grow vegetables. They took a couple of years to conscientiously restore it and to make it fertile, thanks to the supply in large quantity of organic matter such as compost, manure and mulch. Today, they grow more than 800 different kinds of fruit and vegetables at the farm. This is an essential point. They never leave the soil uncovered. Also, cultures associations are designed to maximize productivity, thanks to the mutual benefits they bring to each other. Each plot contains multiple vegetables. So where the intensive agriculture grows only one kind of plant, permaculture grows 3 or 4 kinds at the same time. Logic might lead us to believe that permaculture is less profitable than traditional extensive agriculture, but that's not the case. A study has been carried out at the Bec et Loin farm by the INRA, AgroParis Tech, the National Institute for Agricultural Research in France. And here is its major conclusion. It is possible to produce a significant yield on a small area cultivated mostly manually and to generate enough profit to ensure an adequate income to someone with an agricultural status. And finally, about Europe, I'm giving you the example of Ireland because this is where I am now and where permaculture is new, so it's an interesting case as well. Now I'd like to move on to Oceania. Some projects are present in small territories such as islands in the Vanuatu archipelago and New Caledonia. Under the influence of Bill Mollison, permaculture is now widespread in Australia, especially on the east coast, and I'm again giving you some links. New Zealand is also a practitioner of permaculture, and I'm also giving you a link to explore it further. I hope you'll forgive me for giving you so many links, but the subject is so vast that I couldn't possibly cover it all. So I think if it interests you, this is probably the best way. You might also want to look at very specific aspects. So the links will help you and will take you even further than what they represent in themselves. So let's recap on the benefits of permaculture. Protecting the planet's resources, regenerating the environment, restoring water level in aquifers and wells, promoting biodiversity and preserving wildlife, reclaiming native traditions and heritage, growing organic produce and reaping its health benefits, producing no waste via composting, recycling, reusing, building sustainable shelters, catching and storing energy, securing food independence at both individual and collective levels, generating a diverse economy with marketable products, sharing resources and yields fairly, requiring less work and energy because of no dig, increasing employment because there's no machinery, offering a chance for adults to get vocational training. And I offer you here a link to a video that recaps those benefits of permaculture.
Permaculture, coined by co-founder Bill Mollison, is a combination of the words permanent and agriculture. Permaculture is an ethically based design system for human habitation that's in harmony with the natural world. As Mollison put it, it's the harmonious integration of landscape and people, providing for their food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a sustainable way. Of course, you can't have a permanent agriculture without a culture to support it. And so permaculture is also permanent culture. So let's talk about the word permanent for a minute. Permanent means something stable and enduring. When something is permanent, it can continue indefinitely without change. So when we're talking about our food, water, energy, and shelter, we're talking about systems and structures that are designed to last and not degrade. Permanent agriculture is sustainable. It has the ability to sustain indefinitely. And if food, water, energy, and shelter systems are to sustain, then they also need to create more energy than they took to make, to regenerate. And that is the type of designs and structures we create with permaculture. Those that are regenerative of soils, clean water, healthy food, building materials, and natural biodiversity.
Let's now move on to the second part of our talk, which is about veganism. So what's the definition of veganism? Well, let's first say that veganism has been practiced for thousands of years for ethical and religious reasons mostly, but only recently in Western countries. As the UK Vegan Society sums it up, veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived mostly, wholly, or partly from animals. Veganism is therefore not in principle related to our concerns regarding hunger in the world. However, as we shall see, especially combined with permaculture, it can offer real solutions to areas where meat is scarce or unaffordable. A big reduction in meat consumption all over the world, with increasing figures concerning meat-free markets and vegan practitioners, has been noticed over the last 5 years. One thing is for sure, there is a universally growing awareness about the fact that meat manufacturing and processing are detrimental to the environment and impact on climate change. So even people who may not have objections with regard to the consumption of animals and their exploitation for that purpose are now turning to veganism in order to reduce their carbon footprint. So, what is the connection between veganism and climate change? A 2021 report by Dr. Sailesh Rao found animal agriculture to be responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gas emissions. The Climate Healers Position paper has been published by the Journal of Ecological Society. It argues that the influence of the meat and dairy industry has underestimated the environmental impact of livestock farming. A 2019 Harvard University report proved that if everyone in the UK went vegan, we would still have enough food for everyone to eat. If the UK returned meat, dairy and egg farms back to forests and grew health-promoting crops for human consumption, we would be able to sustain human calorie and protein needs in place of feed currently grown for animals. A 2019 Imperial College study found that your diet is where you can make the biggest difference, followed by travel and heating. It is unrealistic to think that people could travel less or avoid heating their homes. Many of them can't, but everyone can indeed eat a vegan diet. A 2018 Greenpeace report found that global meat and dairy production and consumption must be cut in half by 2050 to avoid dangerous climate change and keep the Paris Agreement on track. If left unchecked, agriculture is projected to produce 52% of global greenhouse gas emissions in the coming decades, 72% of which will come from meat and dairy. In 2018, research by the University of Oxford found that even the most environmentally damaging plant milk, which is almond, is better for the planet than cow's milk, as cow's milk has significantly higher impacts across all metrics. In 2022, referencing this research, Dr. Hannah Ritchie said cow's milk causes around 3 times as much greenhouse gas emissions, uses around 10 times as much land, 2 to 20 times as much fresh water, and creates much higher levels of eutrophication, which is the excessive plant and alga growth in freshwater and coastal marine ecosystems. Like permaculture, vegan gardening essentially promotes plant growth, avoiding the use of unnatural and animal-based fertilizers and pesticides using green manure. It also promotes the no-dig method and provides a safe haven for wildlife. I send you to consult a very good presentation by Leanne Lindsay Coopers on A New Veganism, How Climate Change Created More Vegans. Let's take a quick look at veganism in the world. And you have a map on this slide on the right-hand side that gives you a link to a source of figures to be much more precise than I'm going to be. I just wanted to give you the main aspects. For instance, the fact that South Africa is the only African country with a sizable vegan following and a popular destination for vegans in the world. In North America, we find that it varies according to regions. In Canada, around 5% of Canadian adults consider themselves vegan. Incidentally, these are the same figures as Israel. In the USA, in 2021, the Good Food Institute reported that in the last year, the sales of vegan foods that are direct replacements for milk, meat, etc. grew by 27%, which is quite important. Also, that plant-based food sales grew almost 2.5 times faster than total food sales from 2018 to 2020. The United States Environmental Protection Agency states that a farm with 2,500 cows produces the same amount of waste as a city of 411,000 people. In 2020, 13% of consumers across Asia stated that they were vegan. In Europe, most European countries have between 3 and 5% vegans in their population. The UK was the most popular country for veganism in 2021, followed by Germany and Austria. In 2019, research found that Denmark had seen a 320% increase in products described as vegan, which is very impressive. According to recent figures, Italy may be the fastest growing meat-free population. As for Poland, since Uber Eats was launched in 2017, the number of vegan food orders has risen by 500%, placing the country second in Europe for plant-based online ordering behind the UK. Let's now look at some figures that confirm the benefits of veganism. Animal agriculture is responsible for about 91% of Amazon rainforest destruction. 77% of the world's farmland is used to graze farmed animals or produce crops to feed farmed animals. Animal agriculture contributes an estimated 18% to total greenhouse gas emissions. For the agriculture sector alone, farmed animals constitute nearly 80% of all emissions. A 2018 Oxford University study found that avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce impact on Earth, as animal farming provides just 18% of calories but takes up 83% of farmland. 82% of starving children live in countries where food is fed to animals eaten by Western countries. A 2019 United Nations report urged people to eat less meat and dairy to combat climate change. Johns Hopkins University found a vegan diet to be the most environmentally friendly of all diets and would cut emissions by 70%. I again invite you to consult the sources used here and also look at more relevant information with a couple of other sites. Let's turn to the graph about Europe, a continent that you would imagine is not the worst in terms of feeding its populations. But it turns out it could also benefit from promoting veganism. Here we see per country the populations unable to afford a meal with meat, fish, chicken, or vegetarian equivalent every second day. This demonstrates that dietary traditions need to be re-examined. And now in our conclusion, I would like to look at the connection between the SDGs, and veganic permaculture as sustainable solution. Our topics regarding Goal 2 partly match those considered for ending poverty, equally providing food and shelter for all, which is the purpose of Goal 1, with a view to achieving good health and well-being, which is Goal 3. Organic and vegan, also known as veganic permaculture, aims at quality food that can also heal. What's more, communal work gives a sense of purpose and belonging that is important to one's mental well-being. Education relating to Goal 4 is provided through the very philosophy of permaculture, which involves training and passing on knowledge. Today, increasingly, local governments and groups are implementing permaculture education as early as primary level. Gender balance, Goal 5, is simply not an issue. Men and women work together on an equal par. Permaculture is open to all and is fair at every level of its operation mode. No issue here regarding inequality of chances or movement either, which is the purpose of Goal 10. As available videos testify, not only do permaculture projects focus on helping women, but permaculture as a whole empowers all who engage with it, no matter who they are. Regarding Goal 6, as we have seen, permaculture also provides and restores water sources in areas where it was believed none was available. In this way, it ensures not only the availability but also the management of water sources on land, and through its practices adds no pollution to streams or coastal marine ecosystems. Permaculture farms can also create their own energy with windmills and solar panels, which is Goal 7, ensuring independence at local level. If the practice was multiplied, people all over the world could afford reliable sources of energy and be responsible for the sustainable management of their needs, which could remain at low cost. If permaculture is not about producing huge yields that could be sold at industrial levels, it does provide a human-sized economic growth that gives communities jobs that pay people enough to support themselves and their families. Even Goal 9, which refers to industrialization and technology, is not completely at odds with our perspective, as veganic permaculture practitioners can embrace the digital age. Veganic permaculture is present in cities all over the world, making them more inclusive, sustainable and resilient, which is Goal 11. Goal 2 is obviously in tune with Goal 12, which is to provide sustainable consumption and production patterns, and also with Goal 13 about climate action. Goal 14 about marine preservation is probably one aspect on which permaculture cannot have an obvious impact, except that its ways of functioning being removed from pollution, it helps protect oceans. Indeed, as Goal 15 highlights regarding life on land, the need to protect, restore and promote terrestrial ecosystems and combat desertification concerns all at the heart of permaculture, also helps the preservation of water ecosystems. Everything is connected. By helping natural ecosystems regenerate also means attracting wildlife back to areas where it had disappeared. Finally, Goal 16 about peace in the world is clearly part of permaculture's philosophy. Hopefully countries will agree to make it happen at a global scale, which would be Goal 17. For those of you who would like to use an interdisciplinary approach, there are quite a lot of films which you can find on the web. Here are just 3 recent examples of fictional representations, a mixture of stories, novels and graphic novels that might interest you. The first one is a French graphic novel published in 2020 called Permacomics, Vivre en permaculture, mode d'emploi. It explores how to live in permaculture as if it were a new country, a new world. The second book is entitled 470. It was also published in 2020. It's a speculative fiction novel exploring what life might be like in a climate change world and the role of permaculture in it. It was written by Australian author Linda Woodrow. And finally, relating to vegan fiction, I suggest a science fiction and fantasy anthology of 17 stories published in 2019, therefore with several authors. Finally, I invite you to reflect on this quote. The greatest change we need to make is from consumption to production, even on a small scale, in our gardens. If only 10% of us do this, there is enough for everyone. And it comes from Bill Mollison. My final slides are meant to help you with your own research on this subject. So the first page of references has to do with some of the books that were mentioned during the presentation. The next slide, further reading, is about, well, things that may not have been mentioned but could be useful to similar arguments. And finally, for those of you who would like to use some of the pictures used in this presentation, I have a page with all the references as well. And finally, I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and that it will feed your reflection. Thank you.